Our longbow divine range is going to rise. He's only a 12-star genius? I think he's at least 16-star. He surpassed two 16-star geniuses in the competition of learning? That's unbelievable. Haha, we picked up a treasure. The Yu clan's contribution cannot go unnoticed. They were able to find such a genius from the black market. Emperor Red Dragon stared blankly at the light screen in the sky. Her ears were filled with deafening cheers. The creatures of this divine range only felt that it was a drama and was amazed. But her feelings were extremely complicated. If she had brought Zhou Xuanji back personally, wouldn't they be able to use such a genius? The more she thought about it, the more regretful she felt. It was as though she had lost her soul. Meanwhile, old ancestor Xin, who was far away in another divine range, fainted out of fear. While everyone was shocked by Zhou Xuanji again, he meditated behind the superstar divine official and cultivated quietly. The other geniuses could not help but admire him for his calmness. Although this kid's cultivation was low, his temperament and talent were really powerful. In time he might become someone like Ying Zhuge. Time ticked by. After the superstar divine official confirmed the top 3, the competition ended. Unlike other competitions, it was very easy to distinguish the top 3 in this competition. The winner of this competition is Longbow Divine Range's 12-star genius, Zhou Xuanji. After the superstar divine official took back all the divine ability orbs, he shouted loudly. His voice resounded throughout the entire superstar competition. Congratulations, Zhou Xuanji. He has won 1 billion merit points and the serendipity of the Great Tao Tempering Pool for a month. Zhou Xuanji opened his eyes wide. This was the learning competition indeed. The reward was almost 5 times that of the Tao debate. Before the superstar divine official could speak, he took out his identity medallion. The superstar divine official took the medallion and sighed in his heart. Is this kid really just a Tao-treading saint? Could he be the reincarnation of some ancient god? Meng Xin and Chang Xingxiao were not in the top 3 because of their mental imbalance. The second and third place were both geniuses who chose a divine ability. How ironic. There was a mistake in publishing the previous chapter. Don't worry, I won't make you spend too much money. I will revise the chapter and publish it directly. Chapter 690. Returning to the superstar Sacred Steel, Zhou Xuanji once again enjoyed everyone's attention. On this day, the heavens' favorites looked at him with awe. Even Ying Zhuge looked at him curiously. Ji Huanglin's eyes became complicated. If he had killed Zhou Xuanji back then, wouldn't he have killed a super genius? Most importantly, he could have easily killed Zhou Xuanji back then, but he did not do so because of various reasons. Perhaps this was God's will. Some people were destined to soar into the sky with an unstoppable momentum. From today onwards, the Kunlun Origin Court has another Zhou Xuanji. TSK, is he really a 12-star genius? Don't tell me that the high-level examiner made a mistake? That's possible. With such learning ability, he's at least 15 stars. Could he be the reincarnation of some almighty figure? Think about which sword path almighty figures have recently reincarnated. Now that I think about it, it's been a long time since a peerless sword master has appeared. The geniuses discussed among themselves, while Zhou Xuanji began cultivating as usual. Now that he had won 2 billion merit points, it was like he had suddenly become rich. He could greatly modify the world in the Lotus and help Emperor Sword Court develop quickly. The more he thought about it, the happier he felt. At the same time, he was very interested in the Great Tao Tempering Pool. It was said that this thing could make the Great Tao soar and even change one's mortal body, but no one knew whether it was true or not. The next competition had already begun, but the shock that Zhou Xuanji brought to everyone was not forgotten as quickly as before. The top 1,000 divine ranges all had their eyes on Zhou Xuanji. The reason was simple. To them, the Longbow divine range did not deserve to have Zhou Xuanji. This kind of prodigy should need a stronger environment. Time ticked by. Zhou Xuanji would occasionally open his eyes to watch the superstar competition, but he was more looking forward to the Great Tao Talent competition. He could not wait to end the superstar competition and continue to grow stronger. He loved the feeling of becoming stronger. The faster the better. Half a year later, there was a loud bang. Suddenly, Zhou Xuanji felt the heavens and earth shake violently. He opened his eyes and saw a blood-red crack in the dusky sky. Everyone be careful. Enemy attack. Fierce Thunder Sovereign shouted in a deep voice, startling all the geniuses and causing them to turn around. Zhou Xuanji had a strange look on his face. There were still people who dared to attack the superstar competition? Tired of living? The other prodigies had the same expression on their faces. They were all in disbelief. The superstar competition was created by a sovereign. Interfering with the superstar competition was equivalent to offending a sovereign. It was definitely courting death. A gigantic hand stretched out from the blood-colored hole. The palm was like a blade, slashing horizontally and vertically, widening the blood-colored hole. This scene caused all the geniuses to feel a chill in their hearts. It was because this hand was too large, like a divine vein. Even though they were separated by several tens of thousands of li, they still felt as if they were looking up at a great mountain. Why is he here? The fierce Thunder Sovereign squinted his eyes and mumbled to himself. His eyes were filled with fear. He immediately cast a spell to send a signal. The superstar competition had been held many times, and there had been instances of enemy attacks throughout history. Even though Supremes were lofty existences, there were still some existences that were too powerful for Supremes to kill for various reasons. Very soon, a huge face appeared in the bloody hole. The face was old and cold and could even be said to be ferocious. Withered hair fell on his forehead, and his eyes were bloodshot like lightning. So many delicacies. His voice was hoarse and full of killing intent. Boom. The dim sky in front of him suddenly shattered. Endless cold wind blew, and a figure as burly as a giant god appeared. He was bare-chested and wearing pitch-black shorts. His calves were entangled with many vines. His bare feet were huge, completely out of proportion with his calves. The muscles on his upper body were extremely impactful. After taking a step forward, he bent over and walked into this independent universe. All the geniuses were shocked, because this guy was carrying a mountain that was even bigger than him on his right shoulder. No one knew how many tens of thousands of meters tall it was. Looking closely, one could see that the mountain wall was bare, trapping countless souls and creatures. The lower half of those creatures and souls were stuck in the mud. Their faces were full of fear and resentment. Their bodies were twisting and struggling non-stop. The strangest thing was that no sound came out. Even Ing Zhuge, Chu Machin and Ji Huanglin couldn't help but frown. Old demon soul mover. Someone cried out in shock. His tone was full of fear. All the geniuses were frightened. Zhou Xuanji on the other hand looked puzzled. What's the origin of Old Demon Soul Mover? Fierce Thunder Sovereign flew to the front and faced Old Demon Soul Mover alone. He said coldly, "Old Demon Soul Mover, you are here to interfere with the superstar competition again. Do you really think that the Sovereign won't kill you?" Old Demon Soul Mover raised the corner of his mouth and sneered, "This time I will eat you too." After that, he raised his left hand and grabbed at Fierce Thunder Sovereign. Fierce Thunder Sovereign raised his arms and countless lightning bolts burst out, turning into a lightning net that covered the void and pounced toward Old Demon Soul Mover. Old Demon Soul Mover was completely unaffected. His left hand suddenly sped up and slapped Fierce Thunder Sovereign away. Boom. Fierce Thunder Sovereign smashed into the ground, causing the ground to collapse. No one knew if he was dead or alive. All the geniuses opened their eyes wide, including Zhou Xuanji. What's going on? Fierce Thunder Sovereign is so weak? No. It's because Old Demon Soul Mover moved too fast. No one could clearly see the slap just now. Old Demon Soul Mover opened his mouth and inhaled deeply. The earth shook and the mountains in the distance shattered directly, turning into a dust storm that gushed into his mouth, including the sea of clouds in the sky. All the geniuses backed away from Old Demon Soul Mover. Even so, the violent suction force made them feel uncomfortable. Zhou Xuanji immediately activated the Sword Fusion Technique and Nine Soul Fusion Technique. His condition improved tremendously, but even so he could not retreat. This suction force was too powerful. What cultivation stage is he at? Zhou Xuanji's heart shuddered. Just a breath was already so powerful. It was hard to imagine what kind of force Fierce Thunder Sovereign was enduring. Looking in the direction of his gaze, Old Demon Soul Mover was so gigantic that it was as though he was going to swallow the entire world. The giant mountain on his shoulder was like a place where evil and resentment gathered. Countless vengeful souls swayed and danced wildly. At this moment, a golden ray of light descended from the sky. A man radiating with a golden radiance pierced toward Old Demon Soul Mover with a long spear. The golden flames transformed into a long pillar that occupied the entire world. It crashed into Old Demon Soul Mover and forcefully pushed him back. Origin Court War God. You dog, you are here again. Old Demon Soul Mover roared madly, deafening Zhou Xuanji and making him dizzy. Origin Court War God, who was shrouded in golden radiance, remained silent. He swung his spear domineeringly, causing Old Demon Soul Mover to disappear into the darkness. Next, Origin Court War God chased after him and disappeared into the dark void. The world fell silent. The giant hole in the distance was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. The geniuses looked at each other. They could see the fear and shock in each other's eyes. Old Demon Soul Mover was terrified. Origin Court War God was shocked. Boom. Fierce Thunder Sovereign broke out of the ground and flew toward the superstar Sacred Steel. Everyone's expression turned weird. Because Fierce Thunder Sovereign's head was twisted by the slap. His face was facing the back, which looked very weird. Chapter 691. Fierce Thunder Sovereign grabbed his chin with his right hand. With a cracking sound he turned his head around. From the beginning to the end, his expression was very calm, without the slightest hint of pain. He glanced at all the geniuses and calmly said, "Okay, with the Origin Court War God taking action, that old demon won't be able to cause any trouble. Let's continue watching the superstar competition." He waved his right hand and a light screen appeared in the sky again. The sacred arena was still in progress, so it was not affected. The geniuses regained their composure, but it was still difficult for them to calm down. The figures of Old Demon Soul Mover and Origin Court War God could not be dispelled from their minds. Zhou Xuanji was the same. He was very curious about the realm of Old Demon Soul Mover and Origin Court War God. They felt that the geniuses of the 9 vast heavens were so insignificant in front of them that they didn't dare to make a move. The path of cultivation is really long. Zhou Xuanji sighed in his heart. He looked forward to the end of the superstar competition even more. After this, he would go into seclusion for a period of time. Then he would begin to accept missions from the Void Boundary War God frequently. He was prepared to rely on battle to become stronger, if it was possible. In the future he would create his own divine range and help Emperor Sword Court take root. As for the Longbow divine range, they would support each other in the future. Yu Xinzhong had mentioned this a long time ago because it was impossible for Zhou Xuanji to stay in the Longbow divine range forever. After all, who was willing to bow down to the weak? With Zhou Xuanji's talent, he would surpass the Longbow divine range sooner or later. In the Kunlun Origin Court, divine ranges could also support each other. Otherwise, the weaker divine ranges would inevitably be eliminated. Zhou Xuanji began thinking about his future plans. He passed the projects one by one. In the blink of an eye, 3 years had passed. The enthusiasm of the Kunlun Origin Court didn't diminish, and the great eliminations continued. After those who had experienced life and death came out, they relied on the atmosphere of the superstar competition to vent their emotions. He was getting closer and closer to the Great Dao Aptitude competition. Zhou Xuanji did not have much hope for this project. After all, his Dao had just been born, and the reason why those geniuses were so talented was related to their Dao. Zhou Xuanji heard from the geniuses around him that the top geniuses were almost all reincarnations of powerful cultivators. Their great Daos were nurtured even before they were reincarnated. Their talent was unimaginable. The reason for this was because the powerhouses had reached a bottleneck and had no choice but to recultivate. The further he progressed, the narrower his innate talent would become. Of course, there were exceptions. There would always be some prodigies who would shock the world the first time they were born. However, no such genius had appeared in this superstar competition. It had happened before, and the commotion it caused was far greater than the shock Zhou Xuanji brought. Since he had nothing to do, Zhou Xuanji began communicating with the Sword Spirit. Sword Spirit, where is Hongmeng from? The Sword Spirit isn't sure either. Then what do you know? The Sword Spirit only knows that the stronger the Sword Master is, the stronger the system will be. The two will support each other without end. The Sword Spirit's words made Zhou Xuanji feel quite comfortable. He hoped that there was no limit between himself and the system. Otherwise, he would be reincarnated like those great cultivators. How uncomfortable would that be? It was no wonder that those super prodigies were so arrogant or apathetic. He was like a high-level big shot that had come to a beginner's village to open a new account. It was difficult for him to have a normal attitude. Time continued to pass. The Great Dao Aptitude competition had finally arrived. Zhou Xuanji landed on the sacred arena again. This time he enjoyed a great deal of attention. Out of everyone here, there weren't many heaven's favorites like him who won first place twice. There were less than 10 of them. The most important thing was that his cultivation was at the bottom of the superstar competition, which made him even more dramatic and eye-catching. How many places can he get this time? I'm scared of losing. I will bet on first place this time. Crazy Ing Zhuge and Chu Machin are also participating. How can he get first place? Too strong. There will be a good show to watch this time. Ing Zhuge, I really want to see his performance in the competition of strength. Zhou Xuanji is doomed this time. Don't talk nonsense. The atmosphere of each divine range had reached an unprecedented level of excitement. The longbow divine range, on the other hand, was very calm because Zhou Xuanji had already won first place in 2 events. No matter how he performed this time, they would accept it. Zhou Xuanji looked around and found that there were more than 400 geniuses in the Great Tao Talent competition. 6 of the top 10 on the Superstar Sacred Steel were participating. They were Ying Zhuge, Chu Machin, Meng Shen, Dabi Momo, Rulai Fu and Wuya. Ji Huanglin and Gu Hanyue, whom Zhou Xuanji had met before, were also present. It could be said that it was a gathering of stars and a showdown between the strong. The rules of the Great Tao Talent competition are group battles. Whoever can last until the end will be the champion. All great Taoists will be reduced to the early stage of the Tao-treading Venerable Realm. You are not allowed to leave the sacred platform, nor are you allowed to attack the participants themselves. Once your great Tao leaves your body, you are not allowed to enter it again. Those who violate the rules will be eliminated immediately. The Superstar Divine official said loftily. Then a light screen rose from the edge of the sacred platform, isolating the sacred platform from the void. Zhou Xuanji immediately sensed many malicious gazes. If a dark horse like him continued to win, it would be an insult to the other heaven's favorites. Therefore he became the first target of many heaven's favorites. Zhou Xuanji sighed and released his sword Wei. The most difficult part of this competition was not to accidentally injure the geniuses during the battle. Otherwise they would be directly eliminated. Zhou Xuanji revolved his great Tao at high speed around himself, and the expressions of the geniuses who were preparing to attack immediately turned grim. Shameless. At the same time, Ying Zhuge and Chu Machin's great Taoists directly collided. The sacred platform had some kind of special restriction that made everyone's great Taoists show their colors. Ying Zhuge's great Tao was blue, holy and domineering. Chu Machin's great Tao was fiery, like a fire dragon, ferocious and mighty. The 2 great Taoists fought fiercely, forcing the surrounding geniuses to retreat with their great Taoists. Gu Hanyue suddenly walked up to Zhou Xuanji with an evil smile on her face. Zhou Xuanji shot a glance at her and immediately understood what this woman wanted to do. He didn't panic. He still let his great Tao revolve around him at high speed. Come and hit me if you dare. If you can't kill me, you will be the one who loses. The other heaven's favorites couldn't care less about him. They all started attacking the great Taoists of others. Most of the heaven's favorites were proud and arrogant. They would rather lose with a bang than win with no face left. But Zhou Xuanji didn't care. After all, he was an outsider. He didn't have many acquaintances in the Kunlun origin court. You still want to hide? Are you still a man? Gu Hanyue said with a cold snort. Her great Tao was like a crescent moon, slashing toward Zhou Xuanji's sword Wei. Zhou Xuanji's sword Wei was in the form of a silver sword. Facing the menacing great Tao, it suddenly flew up and fell toward Gu Hanyue's great Tao. This move was quite similar to the heavenly sword falling. Gu Hanyue smiled disdainfully as she manipulated her great Tao to collide with Zhou Xuanji's sword Wei. Boom! A gust of wind blew, fluttering the robes of the 2. Their great Taoists also began to fight fiercely. Chapter 692. At first, Gu Hanyue despised Zhou Xuanji. But she didn't expect Zhou Xuanji's sword Tao to be so tenacious. She couldn't defeat him easily. It seems that he really has more than a 12-star aptitude. Gu Hanyue narrowed her eyes as a ripple appeared in her heart. Zhou Xuanji raised the corner of his mouth and said with a smile, Fairy, what's the benefit of eliminating me? Can one person get into the top 3? Only the top 3 would get a reward. Gu Hanyue said disdainfully, I didn't want to be in the top 3. I will vent my anger first. What top 3? This kid is crazy. Don't you see how many 16-star and 17-star geniuses are participating? You have to dare to think about anything. Just like the first 2 times I won, if I don't dare to think about it, how can I get it? Let's not be delusional. You get second, I get third. As for Ying Zhuge and Chu Machin, look at their fighting posture. How can they coexist? Zhou Xuanji said seriously. As he spoke, he deliberately pulled out the World Fool sword and pointed it at the sky to show his determination. Gu Hanyue suddenly felt that it made sense. If I can get into the top 3 in the Great Tao aptitude. She was immediately tempted but still hesitated. How do I know that he won't plot against me? Zhou Xuanji shook his head and said, A man can't stand without trust. If I were such a villain, how could I have come this far? Gu Hanyue was moved. Putting aside the Tao debate, Zhou Xuanji really didn't show any bad character. Okay, let's join hands. Gu Hanyue agreed. She regretted it as soon as she said it. Why am I so easily convinced? Is it because I want to get into the top 3? So far, she had never gotten into the top 3 in the first 2 events she participated in. Zhou Xuanji separated his sword Dao from Gu Hanyue's great Dao and said, "Let's see if there are people who make us unhappy. We will eliminate them one by one and slowly develop. Let those super geniuses continue to fight. We will wait for an opportunity." Gu Hanyue nodded before taking Zhou Xuanji to find trouble with those enemies. Although Zhou Xuanji's sword Dao wasn't very strong, it was created by himself after all. It was perfectly compatible with him. Together with Gu Hanyue's great Dao, 2 against 1 was no problem. The great Daos were destroyed by them one after another. Those geniuses looked at Zhou Xuanji and Gu Hanyue with hatred but didn't dare to say anything. A loss was a loss. How could he lose his grace? After the battle, Gu Hanyue's impression of Zhou Xuanji changed. "You're quite smart." Gu Hanyue glanced at him and snorted with a smile. Zhou Xuanji smiled but did not reply. When this scene fell into the eyes of the people in the outside world, it caused a huge shock. Is this kid going to be a dark horse again? Gu Hanyue is so silly. Be careful not to be deceived by that kid. What's their relationship? Isn't Gu Hanyue an icy beauty? She actually joined hands with Zhou Xuanji. Damn it. It looks like he's going to enter the top 3. Why is it like this? I don't believe that he can still enter the top 3. The longbow divine range was in an uproar. Seeing Zhou Xuanji and Gu Hanyue teaming up, they were suddenly looking forward to it. Could it be that Zhou Xuanji was going to counterattack again? This was a competition of great Dao aptitude. In the Yu family. The old beggar laughed heartily. This brat's ability to pick up women is truly inherited from me. Su Qing and Gu Qianxia rolled their eyes at him. They were too lazy to refute him. Qiu Hu winked at Xian Xianghua and asked, "Realm Lord Xian, are you angry?" Xian Xianghua tilted her head with a smile and replied, "This shows that my little husband is charming. Why should I be angry? I wonder if I have such a blessing?" Qiu Hu choked. He quickly snorted and said, "Of course." Unfortunately, no one believed him. Young Master Zhou is extremely talented and charming. He will naturally attract talented women, Yu Zhongxiu said with a smile. But her smile was a little bitter. Fortunately, it was covered by a veil. Everyone continued to pay attention to the Great Dao Aptitude competition. One had to admit that Gu Hanyue was indeed very strong. She controlled her Great Dao to cast all kinds of divine abilities. Zhou Xuanji's sword Dao was responsible for supporting her. The 2 defeated many geniuses one after another. This made other geniuses begin to imitate them. Only Ying Zhuge and Chu Machin were still fighting one-on-one. Ji Huanglin looked for Zhou Xuanji and said, "Let's join forces." Zhou Xuanji narrowed his eyes and smiled, "Okay." It seemed that Ji Huanglin's ambition was not small. He wanted to be first. With Ji Huanglin's ability, there was still hope for him to win the top 3. Gu Hanyue furrowed her brow and asked through voice transmission, "If he joins us, I will only be 3rd. Zhou Xuanji replied, "That's not necessarily true. What if he is first? Don't worry, I never buy or sell at a loss." Seeing that he was so confident, Gu Hanyue could only give up. The pace of the Great Dao talent competition was very fast. In less than half a day, 200 geniuses had escaped. Some of them did so because their Great Dao came into contact with other geniuses. The Great Dao of the Dao-treading Saint Realm could hardly cause harm to other geniuses. But due to the rules they lost. Wuya suddenly brought one of his little brothers to Zhou Xuanji. "Brother Ji, come and cooperate with us. Let me eliminate this kid first," Wuya said with a smile. In the Dao debate, he was eliminated by Zhou Xuanji in the first round. It was really shameful. He had to get back at Zhou Xuanji. Ji Huanglin, expressionless, said, "Words are useless. Let's fight." Having said this, his Great Dao took the lead. Zhou Xuanji, on the other hand, controlled his sword Dao to cast the Ancestor Dragon Sword, transforming into a 5-clawed silver dragon. Gu Hanyue didn't delay either. The 3 of them fought Wuya and Zhou Xuanji together. Wuya didn't expect Ji Huanglin to be so decisive. He had no time to retreat and could only fight. In the end, under Ji Huanglin's strong leadership, Wuya and Zhou Xuanji were eliminated. In the process of flying to the superstar divine official, they were drooling with regret and resentment. Well, they were cursing. "Very easy," Zhou Xuanji said with a smile. Then he gave Ji Huanglin a look, asking him to look at Ying Zhuge and Chu Machin. The battle between the 2 17-star geniuses was still inextricably tied. Their momentum was very strong, but it was a little weaker than at the beginning. If this continued, it would be very beneficial for Ji Huanglin. Ji Huanglin transmitted his voice to him and asked, "What is your goal?" Zhou Xuanji replied, Third, I have already won first place twice. I don't need another one. This sentence was true. It was too difficult to get first place again. Of course, if everyone was eliminated, leaving only a dying guy waiting for him, he wouldn't mind creating a historical record. He would be the first genius under the age of 1,000 to win first place 3 times in a row in the superstar competition. Just the thought of it was beautiful. After getting Zhou Xuanji's answer, Ji Huanglin seemed to feel more at ease. He took the initiative to walk toward the other geniuses. The 3 continued to fight. During this period, Zhou Xuanji was paying attention to the situation of the entire Saint competition. He specifically picked the geniuses with intermediate strength to fight. He kept the weak ones as if they were pigs. As for the geniuses who were too strong, he would let them exhaust each other and deal with them later. Chapter 693. Time passed bit by bit. Zhou Xuanji, Ji Huanglin, and Gu Hanyue seemed very relaxed. With the 3 of them working together, they were not tired at all. This also led to an increase in the number of small teams, with the largest group consisting of 6 geniuses. They belonged to the weaker group, so they weren't a threat for the time being. The stronger the prodigy, the more they didn't want to stick together. Ji Huanglin was an exception. He was too big a target, and even if he won with Zhou Xuanji and Gu Hanyue, no one would say anything. Because in the eyes of everyone, he was carrying 2 burdens. Another half a day passed. There were only 71 prodigies left in the sacred arena. Other than Zhou Xuanji, the rest of the geniuses had at least 14-star aptitude. Zhou Xuanji was very unusual among them. The battle continued. Yingzhuge and Chumachin were still fighting to the death. These 2 fellows didn't seem to care about the outcome of the competition of great Dao aptitude, and they only wanted to defeat each other. After all, they were the only ones with 17-star aptitude, and the divine ranges they came from were ranked extremely high, so the rewards were not important to them at all. They just wanted to prove themselves. As the number of sky prides on the sacred arena decreased, the atmosphere outside became livelier. This was the second to last competition. Looking at those spectacular and mystical great Dao mystiques, putting aside the stakes, it was also very enjoyable to watch. This kid hasn't been eliminated yet. Ah, I feel like I'm going to make a killing. The brother who bet on Zhou Xuanji, do you want to drink with us later? Is there any justice in this world? A Dao-treading venerable won 3 rounds in a row? What is Ji Huanglin thinking? I have a feeling. Ji Huanglin and Gu Hanyue are going to be tricked by this kid. Everyone cried out in shock. Seeing Zhou Xuanji walking on the sacred arena so casually, they all felt that it was unreal. That's ridiculous. Didn't this kid come from the longbow divine range? How could he befriend 2 super geniuses? Also, could Ji Huanglin and Gu Hanyue have the dignity of experts? Ji Huanglin and Gu Hanyue didn't know the reactions of the outside world. They had their own thoughts and goals. Zhou Xuanji did not look at them, but he was curious in his heart. Are these 2 fellows affected by the World Fool Sword? 3 days later. There were only 32 geniuses left on the sacred arena. Except for Yingzhuge and Chumachin, no one else dared to act rashly. Who do we fight? Gu Hanyue asked softly. Her eyes were a little excited as she looked around. Don't worry, Zhou Xuanji said, we're competing to see who can't hold back anymore. Those who could persist until now except for him were all powerhouses. Most of them had already reached the 9 vast heavens realm. Even if their great paths were suppressed, their magical powers were still powerful. Ji Huanglin glanced at Zhou Xuanji thoughtfully. In the team of 3, the weakest one was actually the one organizing the operation. Unknowingly, Gu Hanyue had already trusted Zhou Xuanji. Ji Huanglin didn't care. Instead, he was observing Zhou Xuanji. This kid is not simple. The corners of Ji Huanglin's mouth curled up as he withdrew his gaze. About 2 hours later, some geniuses could not hold it in anymore and attacked Zhou Xuanji and the others. The leader was the 16-star prodigy Meng Shen. He brought along 2 16-star prodigies and 1 15-star prodigy. They could not bear to see Zhou Xuanji continue living like this. He was too despicable. Ji Huanglin snorted coldly. His golden great path turned into a giant, blocking the 4 great paths that were attacking him. He stood alone against the powerful enemies, looking awe-inspiring. Gu Hanyue followed suit, while Zhou Xuanji turned around because other geniuses were preparing to deal with them. You guys have to think this through. If I stay until the end, you guys will have a chance of winning. If it's any other genius, you guys will be under a lot of pressure. I've already won first place twice, I don't need another one. I just want to stay a little longer. You guys understand? Zhou Xuanji said with a smile, and the 2 geniuses who were walking toward him stopped immediately. That's right. No matter how cunning Zhou Xuanji was, he had to fight in the end. This kid's great Tao was not considered strong, so he was easy to deal with. They glanced at each other, then turned around and charged at Ji Huanglin and Ji Yunshu's enemies. Are you all idiots? Meng Xin roared angrily, almost dying from anger. However, the other party did not answer him. After they started fighting, the other prodigies followed suit, and a chaotic battle broke out. Zhou Xuanji controlled the sword Dao to coil around his body, forcing the geniuses not to attack him, lest they accidentally hurt him. Gu Hanyue secretly despised him, but she didn't say anything. With Zhou Xuanji around, they were indeed safer. Because those geniuses were too stupid, they actually believed his lies. However, it seems like I believed it too. Gu Hanyue furrowed her brow. She felt that something was wrong. But when she thought that Zhou Xuanji's great Tao wasn't strong, she dispelled her worries. Zhou Xuanji's right hand rested on the World Fool sword on his waist. He was in a good mood. Come closer the better. He smiled proudly in his heart, hiding his merits and fame. Unknowingly, except for Ying Zhuge and Chu Machin, all the other geniuses were within a kilometer radius of him. The World Fool sword was secretly playing a role. Because there was no Tao energy fluctuation, it made people ignore its existence. The other geniuses also had all kinds of accessories. The superstar divine official could tell who was using an artifact. If everyone could use an artifact, Zhou Xuanji wouldn't need to play. No matter how determined a man was, he would occasionally want to have a warm family. Zhou Xuanji smiled and said, "Everyone pack up and prepare to depart." Everyone nodded and returned to their rooms. On that day, Zhou Xuanji and the others left under the warm send-off of the Longbow Divine Range. Old ancestor Longbow also shamelessly came to see them off. Tears streamed down his face as if he had lost his beloved. Half-truths and half-lies. His heart really ached. He was really embarrassed. After leaving the Longbow Divine Range, Ji Huanglin took out a small golden boat. It quickly expanded into a giant ship for them to land on. Rumble, the golden wheel suddenly tore through the universe and disappeared into the distance. It passed through the divine ranges as though it had teleported. On the massive ship, Zhou Xuanji and the others did not feel any discomfort. The old beggar exclaimed, "This divine ship requires at least 100 million merit points, and it can withstand the attack of a Tao ancestor." The others were speechless. Zhou Xuanji raised his brow. "Should I buy such a divine ship too? If I offend a Tao ancestor in the future, I can still run away." He had 7 billion merit points. He could totally squander it. Ji Huanglin turned around and said with a smile, "With Zhou Xuanji's talent, he can choose any divine ship like this in the Evil Sky Divine Range. Not only that, but there are also divine clothes and countless treasures. There are only things that you can't imagine." 18-star aptitude was extremely rare even in the Kunlun Origin Court. After Beast Sovereign knew about it, he was overjoyed. His unhappiness with the Longbow Divine Range disappeared instantly. He felt as though he had picked up a great bargain. He was extremely excited. He had already formulated a training plan for Zhou Xuanji. He wanted to train Zhou Xuanji personally. Even in the Evil Sky Divine Range, there was only one 18-star genius. That genius had lived for countless years and had become one of the leaders of the Evil Sky Divine Range. The golden ship was extremely fast. After about an hour, they arrived at the Evil Sky Divine Range. The Evil Sky Divine Range was hundreds of times bigger than the Longbow Divine Range. They couldn't even see the top. After flying into the Evil Sky Divine Range, they saw a magnificent world. The golden divine ship rose up without slowing down at all. Soon they came to the top and landed on a wasteland. "Wait here. I will take him to the range master first," Ji Huanglin said before leaving with Zhou Xuanji. After saying this, Ji Huanglin left with Zhou Xuanji and turned into a ray of golden light, disappearing into the horizon. Zhou Xuanji couldn't see anything because of his Tao energy. After a while, the golden light dissipated and Zhou Xuanji landed on the ground. This was a brightly lit palace. The ceiling seemed to be inlaid with a bright sun. The temperature was very high. Creatures below the Saint Realm might not be able to bear it. Beast Sovereign was sitting on a crystal throne. After seeing Zhou Xuanji, he revealed a sinister smile. "Ji Huanglin, get down," Beast Sovereign said slowly. Beast Sovereign said slowly. Hearing this, Ji Huanglin immediately disappeared. Zhou Xuanji walked up to him and cupped his fists. "Thank you for your kindness, Beast Sovereign." Since he had come to the Evil Sky Divine Range, Zhou Xuanji had to correct his attitude. He couldn't turn into Long Out Yin and tell Beast Sovereign what to do. If that happened, even if he had a 28-star aptitude, he would still die. This sovereign appreciates you very much. In the future, your ID card will be stamped with this sovereign's mark. If you encounter danger, take out your ID card. In addition, this sovereign will send someone to take you to choose your resources, Beast Sovereign said with a smile, staring at Zhou Xuanji. The more he looked at Zhou Xuanji, the more satisfied he was. The more he looked at Zhou Xuanji, the more satisfied he was. This kid was devilishly talented. His behavior was also very good. He was neither servile nor overbearing. He understood etiquette. Such a genius could go further. Before Beast Sovereign's rise, he was also like this. Only when he was strong enough could he do whatever he wanted. Thank you, Zhou Xuanji thanked him again. At the same time, he was looking forward to what kind of resources he would get. Beast Sovereign continued, your exterminating divine eyes have a very powerful origin. This sovereign can find one of the 5 ultimate gods to teach you. Zhou Xuanji suddenly thought of barbaric ultimate god and asked, can you save barbaric ultimate god? I am indebted to him for teaching me. With Beast Sovereign's ability, this shouldn't be difficult. Barbaric ultimate god? It's a piece of cake. He will be your subordinate in the future. With your aptitude, he doesn't deserve to be your senior. Beast Sovereign shook his head with a smile. Beast Sovereign shook his head and smiled. He did not put barbaric ultimate god in his eyes at all. He paused for a moment before continuing, cultivate well. The evil sky divine range will do its best to nurture you. But you have to repay the evil sky divine range. Your first goal is to surpass and defeat Ing Zhuge.